What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So we have obviously had two massive deals already in the Sean Monahan and Elias Lindholm deals, two of like the top 5 guys on the trade board, which makes it seem like it is going to be like last year's deadline where all of these guys get traded before the actual deadline. It happened with O'Reilly, Horvat, Tarasenko. I think we're going to have that again. So I wanted to get ahead of it before another guy gets traded and go in depth on some of the top names that can potentially get traded. And I'm going to be predicting where they end up going, as well as about what roughly price they would have to pay in order to get these guys. I got guys like Hanifin, Guentzel, Chychrun, Markstrom. I'm not saying these guys are definitely going to get traded, just looking at some of the top names and saying where they might get traded at this year's deadline. I'm not saying they 1000% get traded, but if they get traded, where they'd go. A guy that I do think that's going to get traded, though, first off, definitely going to get traded, is Adam Henrik. He obviously is an expiring unrestricted free agent. I don't think the Ducks are going to keep him around at like 33, 34 years old. I have him heading to the Colorado Avalanche. Look at what the Avalanche did this offseason. They went out, they got Ryan Johansson. Didn't really work. He's playing like shit. He's on pace for like 30 goddamn points. He's playing like shit compared to like being a second line center on actual contender. Ross Colton, very good third liner, not a second line center on an actual contender. They're not going to get a Nazem Kadri like when he was on the goddamn cup winning team at 87 points in 71 games. But I think a guy like Adam Henrik, that is a veteran, that is actually playing better this year than previous years, 33 points in 48 games, as well as a very solid two-way game with a bunch of playoff experience with the New Jersey Devils prior. I think Adam Henrik makes a lot of sense for the Colorado Avalanche. What it would cost to get him, probably like a first and a third, similarly to a Sean Monahan. A Sean Monahan is cheaper, only at a $1.9 million cap hit, but I think a first and a third, maybe a first and a decent prospect should get you a guy like Adam Henrik, and should get you Adam Henrik at half retained. When looking at his cap hit of 5.7, you're going to need to get that half retained. So I think Adam Henrik, the Colorado Avalanche, they need to be aggressive this year, considering last year they kind of mailed it in. Their only big move was like Lars Eller. So I think you go out and you kind of make a splash. Vladimir Tarasenko, I'm going to the Carolina Hurricanes. People forget, last offseason, there was a solid week where Tarasenko, it looked like he was an absolute lock to be a Carolina Hurricane. Then he like switched agencies, ended up on the Ottawa Senators. So clearly Don Waddell does like Vladimir Tarasenko's game. There is some mutual interest before. And although I don't think Tarasenko is playing like he was 3-4 years ago, like back to 35 and 35, he's still having a solid season. He has 31 points thus far for the Ottawa Senators. He's still a very solid middle six second liner. So when looking at Carolina, I don't think they're going to go out and try to solve the goalie situation at the deadline. Trade for like a Jake Allen with a bunch of term left, a year left after this at $3.8 million. I think they get a rental like a Vladimir Tarasenko. Their defense core is absolutely loaded. They're paying Orlov $7.75 million to be a third pair guy. So in looking at it, I think Tarasenko does make a lot of sense for the Carolina Hurricanes. And you can probably get him for, assuming it's half retained, get him down to $2.5 million. You can probably get him for a second round pick and an okay prospect. They wouldn't have to give up Bradley Nadeau in a type of trade for that. A second round pick and a former like third round pick that's in your system. I think that'd be more than enough to get you Vladimir Tarasenko. Next up, Jake Guentzel. Again, not saying that he's going to get traded. I personally don't think the Penguins should trade him, because what's the point of getting future assets when your entire core is between the ages of 33 and 37 besides Guentzel? So I don't think that they should trade him, but if he ends up getting traded, I have him heading to the Edmonton Oilers. This is not... Obviously, the Edmonton Oilers, as long as they have McDavid and Draisaitl, they are going to be high-level competitors. But when looking at their salary cap situation this year, they obviously have the $3.225 million cap bonus overage from Connor Brown that's going to be on their books next year, as well as next year being the final year for the Draisaitl and Bouchard deal. So this year, in terms of a cap structure, it's not going to get better than this compared to the guys that they're eventually going to have to pay. So you go out, you go all in, you get a guy like Jake Guentzel, especially because your team is playing so much better of late. Yes, you would want to upgrade over a guy maybe like a Cody Ceci, but they did go defenseman last year with Ekholm, so I think they just go offensive firepower. And similarly, Stuart Skinner's been playing very good of late, so I don't think that you go out and trade for a goalie. I think Jake Guentzel on this team would be disgusting. You look at it, the RNH, Hyman, and McDavid line has absolutely been cooking. You give Draisaitl a legit left winger to play instead of like goddamn Evander Kane. You throw Evander Kane down to that third line. I think it would be absolutely gross. In terms of a price that would be, probably be Xavier Bourgault, who is their 2021 first-round pick. Philip Broberg, who has been a bust up until this point, but is playing actually very good in the AHL right now, as well as a first and a second round pick. So you get a B plus prospect, you get a guy that has some NHL experience, was a former higher pick, and you get a first and a second round pick from the Edmonton Oilers. You might say that's not enough, but I don't think Pittsburgh would have a ton of leverage. Guentzel is an absolute stud, but I think that is a fair trade. And if you're Edmonton, go all the way in. Go all the way in. Next up, Noah Hanifin. I have him heading to the Dallas Stars. Dallas's forward core is disgusting right now. They're basically running out 2 first lines at this point. In net, you just got to hope that Jake Ottinger turns it around. I think he will. Obviously, you're not going to be trading for a goalie. Wedgwood's also a very solid backup. So I think if this team's going to add, and they probably should, considering they are contending at a high level right now, I think a guy like Noah Hanifin makes a lot of sense. Harley and Heiskanen has formed a fantastic pair. Then you got Lindell and Hakanpää on your second pair. It's okay. It's more of a physicality line. Not a ton of offense comes from that line. And then your last line, your third pair is Ryan Suter and goddamn Nils Lundqvist. Both of them are not that good. So you bring in a guy like a Noah Hanifin to throw on your second line, be your two-way second pair guy. I think that would be a good fit for the Dallas Stars and really round out that defensive core. Thankfully, Harley of late has really exploded and became that number 2 that they need. So if you're bringing in Noah Hanifin to be your number 3 defenseman, that is a really well-rounded defense core, especially when looking at the 2 more physical guys in Lindell and Hakanpää. When looking at what this would cost them, similarly to a Lindholm price, probably a first-round pick and a decent prospect. I was thinking maybe Christian Kyrou, who is their 2022 second round pick, obviously brothers with Jordan Kyrou, but he's a defenseman, or you just go a first round pick and a second round pick. I think the Calgary Flames would probably bite at that. So Hanifin to the Dallas Stars, make them a complete team, in my opinion, if they ended up doing that. Frank Vatrano, New York Rangers. I obviously have him in the Rangers getup right there, but it's clearly familiar. He has played there before he went to the Anaheim Ducks. He had a lot of success there. He's playing fantastic with the Anaheim Ducks. 22 goals in 50 games, not just under, but on pace for around 35 goals. I was about to say 40, bad math. But when looking at him, he's going to be a very attractive option. Will the Ducks trade him? I'm not sure because he does have a year left. It's not like he's expiring. He has a year left at $3.65 million. For a guy that's on like 35 goal pace, that is a steal. But maybe considering he is in his late 20s, he might even be 30. Probably not part of the Ducks' long-term core, so maybe you sell on him now. When looking at it, yes, he's played with guys on the Rangers before. He's played with, I think he was with Zibanejad and Kreider on that first line. So I think you could slot him in, and that would really help your overall winger depth when looking at Wheeler. And not what Ranger fans were expecting. They just saw the name. They didn't realize that he'd been going down nonstop. Capo Caco is obviously not taking that next step. So you need to bring in a winger right now. And I think Frank Vatrano makes a lot of sense for the New York Rangers. Would you trade a Capo Caco for Vatrano? Definitely interesting. I think it probably would cost a first-round pick or Capo Caco when looking at him having that extra year left. Probably a first and a third, or Capo Caco and like a second would probably make sense for the Anaheim Ducks, getting either a first-round pick or a guy in Capo Caco that did just a year ago have, 39 points at 21 years old. There's still some potential with Capo Caco, and he can be an important piece to the Anaheim Ducks if they ended up getting him. Next up, we got Shawn Walker, and I actually have Shawn Walker heading to the Winnipeg Jets. I don't think the Jets are done yet. They obviously already traded their first-round pick for Sean Monahan, but I think they look to beef up even more considering how well this team is playing right now. Last year's deadline, they were kind of collapsing, so they only ended up making the Nino Niederreiter trade. But when looking at a guy like Shawn Walker, he had a fantastic start. I think he had like 12 points in his first 17 games. He was balling out. He has obviously slowed down since then, but Winnipeg got really shored up their second-line center position, and I think they're going to be in the market for another defenseman just to really add to their overall depth. I don't think Shawn Walker is a great second pair guy, but he'd be a fantastic third pair or a low-end second pair guy. Has been playing around 20 minutes a night for this Flyers team, a Flyers team that has far exceeded expectations, mainly because of Shawn Walker. What it would cost to get him wouldn't be a first-round pick for Shawn Walker. It would probably be either a third and a half-decent prospect or maybe a second-round pick. So when looking at that, if Winnipeg really thinks that this is their year and they really want to beef up, I think Shawn Walker to Winnipeg does make some sense. Another defenseman, Jacob Chikrin. Do I think he gets traded at this year's deadline? I don't know yet, but if he does, I think the fit with the Vegas Golden Knights does make some sense. You look at the Knights defense core, it's kind of old right now. Petrangelo's 34, Martinez is 38, McNabb's 33, even Shea Theodore's 28. And they're not that good defensively this year. They're 13th in the entire league in expected goals against per 60. So bringing in a guy like Chychrun, a younger guy, a guy that can be a part of your core for at least the next year and a half, then maybe you let them walk in free agency. But their window is probably the next 2 years, considering, again, Pietrangelo, Marchessault, Stone, they're all getting up there in age. So you go after a guy like Chychrun for cheap. You ship out a guy like McNabb and maybe Brett Howden to make the money work with the Ottawa Senators, as well as attach a first and a second, conditional second that maybe turns into a third when looking at it. I don't think the return that the Ottawa Senators got traded for Jacob Chychrun, I think, is about what they're going to get back. Probably a first and a second round pick. I think they got a first and 2 seconds. But again, Chychrun had another year on his contract at that point, so it was more valuable. And I don't think Ottawa has much leverage as maybe the Coyotes did. So I think a first, a second, and some expiring guys like Howden, maybe even just ship out of Martinez. He's making 5.25. That can make a lot of sense for the Vegas Golden Knights in terms of the next 2 runs basically being all in when looking at them. And I think Chychrun really fits what they need. They don't need goalies, obviously. Their forward core is very deep. So going out and getting a guy like Jacob Chychrun can make a lot of sense. Anthony Duclair, I don't love this fit, but I went to the Toronto Maple Leafs. I don't think the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to go all in like they did last year, but I think a guy like Duclair can be very useful. He was pretty bad last year on the Florida Panthers when he was coming off his torn ACL. He had 2 goals in 20 games. He's playing better this year, 9 goals, 8 assists, 17 points in 46 games. Obviously plays on a horrible team, but I think on a much better team, he can flourish more, and you could get him for pretty cheap. I think you could get him for a 3rd round pick, probably at half retained. So I think when looking at Toronto Maple Leafs, if they're not trying to go all in and want to kind of bet on a reclamation project, I could easily see Duclair, once he's around better guys like we saw when he was playing with Alexander Barkov on the goddamn Florida Panthers, and he was a 60 to 70 point guy. I think you could maybe take a chance, buy low on an Anthony Duclair, an expiring guy. If you're not set on trading your 1st round pick, I think that can make sense for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Chris Tanev to the Ottawa Senators. Obviously, Friedman has been pretty vocal about it, that there is their mutual interest. The Ottawa Senators are apparently looking for pros, and if the Ottawa Senators are willing to move off of Jacob Chychrun, which they probably should at this point, I think Chris Tanev coming in, pairing Chabot with Chris Tanev makes a lot more sense than pairing him with Jacob Chychrun. I don't love his age. I think he's 34 years old, but if Ottawa thinks that they're, again, a high-level competitive team the next 2 to 3 years, you sign Chris Tanev to a 3 or 4 year deal at around $4.5 million. I think that can make a lot of sense. What it would cost, probably a 2nd round pick and an okay prospect. I don't think Chris Tanev's going for a 1st round pick at this point, but Sean Monahan also did get a 1st round pick. A little bit of difference between a 2nd line center and probably a 2nd pair, maybe even 3rd pair guy. But Chris Tanev is very good defensively. Ottawa obviously lacks defensive defensemen right now besides Artem Zub. So I like Chris Tanev to the Ottawa Senators, and that's kind of not even my prediction. That's just one of the main rumors right now. And then lastly, Jacob Markstrom. Again, I don't know if he's going to get traded, but if he does, I like the LA Kings for a potential fit. The LA Kings are kind of spiraling right now. So yes, while Markstrom does have another 2 years after this at $6 million, it is not cheap by any means. The LA Kings are not in a good spot. Cam Talbot has an 880 in his last 10, 12 games. He is started out fantastic, playing like shit of late, and Markstrom potentially trading for a guy like Markstrom can maybe turn them around. I'm not sure what the money situation would look like to open up that much money, but I think Rob Blake can get it done. And if you're Rob Blake, are you fighting for your job at this year's deadline? If they miss the playoffs and you look at what he did this summer with the PLD trade and the PLD extension, that could arguably be a fireable offense. I'm just going to say that. So when looking at it, if he wants the best possible goalie on the trade block, it is risky, but at $6 million, that's average starter money at this point, and Markstrom has been playing like a top 5 goalie in the entire NHL this season. So if Rob Blake wants to get aggressive, Jacob Markstrom, someone to take on that contract, they would have to be very desperate in order to deal with that major risk. I don't see the Hurricanes doing it. I don't see the Edmonton Oilers. They're going to make the playoffs regardless. They don't need to fix the goaltending. The LA Kings, just to make the goddamn playoffs, might have to make a very drastic move like a Jacob Markstrom. But yeah, let me go through it once again. Adam Henrik, Avalanche, Tarasenko, Canes, Guentzel, Oilers, Hanifin, Stars, Vatrano, Rangers, Walker, Jets, Chikrin, Golden Knights, forgot for a second, Duclair, Leafs, Tanev, Senators, Markstrom, Kings. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? Again, I said it on my Twitter. I kind of like this like staggered, like 1 to 2 deals every single week leading up to the deadline. I don't like the one big deal. It's more content for me to make compared to just one day running with my goddamn head cut off. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about this? Where do you think these guys are going to be going? And I'll be seeing the next one.